Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today's episode is set to soar to new heights because we're going to be venturing into space, the final frontier, with today's guest, who's Peter Platzer. He's a visionary at the helm of a company called Spire, and they're taking the data analytics world by storm with an eye in the sky because Spire has taken on a critical mission, harnessing the vastness of space to tackle the pressing issues here on Earth. And at a time where our planet is facing unprecedented weather extremes due to climate change, Peter and his team at Spire are pioneering the use of satellite technology, not just for weather forecasting, but for safeguarding economies, enhancing global security and protecting the environment. But enough from me. Buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Glasgow, where today's guest is ready to enlighten us all on how space is not just the next frontier for exploration, but a bastion for Earth's protection. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Peter Platzer, and I am originally a high-energy and fusion physicist from Austria. And for the last 11 years, I had the great pleasure and the excitement of co-founding with Joel and Jeroen and later Teresa, Spire Global, and building it to a global company with offices all across the world and even off the world, as we have over 100 satellites in space.
Absolutely incredible. And one of the things I try and do on this podcast every single day is get people thinking bigger about some of the problems we can solve with technology, how it impacts our life, our work, our world, even planet, or even beyond that. So with that in mind, Peter, can you elaborate on Spire's mission to harness space to solve problems on Earth? And how does this guiding principle shape your company's strategy and product offerings? 'Cause it's phenomenal what you're doing here.
So ever since being a kid, I had this vision of how could we leverage space to enhance the human experience, the human condition, our understanding of ourselves, our lives, the lives of the people around us. And it was a long time before space as a technology actually became accessible and quickly moving enough that you as an individual could actually, come up with an idea and start it and build something around it. And it wasn't until literally, as I said, 10, 12 years ago that this became possible. Now, when you think about the big generational challenges that we face as humanity, two that always resonated deeply with me are climate change and global security, right? I took a hike up with my wife, a mountain, and we were told it's going to be nice weather when you come down. And we were up there at 12,000 feet. And, we ate our lunch. Actually, it was late lunch. And then it started snowing heavily outside. And so we asked the person in that hut, can we still get down the mountain? And he said, you can get down, just not alive. Oh. So he basically said, the guys, you will not make it alive down the mountain. You got to stay up there. So we were locked up there because the weather forecast was wrong, right? That was just like a personal experience of impact of weather. And then on the other side, global security, I grew up in Austria. Something like 20, 25 minutes east of me was the Iron Curtain. And I knew how massively different the life was from people that were just like me, but born 20 minutes to the east of me. And so both of those concepts always have deeply resonated with me on a personal level. And space is that ultimate high ground that gives you information and insight and clarity and perspective and transparency that allows you to improve climate change challenges that we face and global security challenges that we face. And that is all that Spire is about. That's exactly what we're working on every single day. That's what our people are passionate about, making a difference in leveraging space to improve life on Earth and leave it just a little bit better than we found her.
And one of the things that put you on my radar was I was reading that you were saying that you believe that every vertical should have a space strategy. So can you tell me more about that and how that plan and journey all came to fruition?
So there's a couple elements to that, Neil. Yeah. The first one is that I actually didn't come up with that statement, to be precise. It was McKinsey who looked at it and recognized, and then told all of their big CEO customers, if you don't have a strategy, a space strategy now, you need one, right? What I had found in my last graduate degree was like a law of 10x performance improvement of small satellites every 5 years. You go back to the computer industry in like the late 80s and early 90s, it was all driven by this Moore's Law thing that everyone talked about, which is twice the compute power every 2 years. So what my research showed is like there is an equivalent thing happening in the space industry, right? It's just like Moore's Law. It's a little bit faster than Moore's Law, but fundamentally speaking, it's the same thing. It's a massive exponential improvement of capabilities every, few years. And so when you take that perspective in, you realize that, every single industry is impacted by a computer and the internet. And when you go back to what the McKinseys and the Boston Consulting Groups and then, the Bains said in the 90s, they said, if you don't have an internet strategy now, you need one. And of course, they were absolutely correct. Every company, just about every company today, has an internet strategy because that underlying, force of Moore's Law 2 times every 2 years is just an overwhelming exponential force that no one can, take themselves out from. And I certainly believe that similar 10x every 5-year law that I found and that I've been now observing and we have all been living for the last, call it 25 years is just going to be as overwhelming for companies, communities, countries across the world that if you don't have a space strategy today, you will absolutely need one because it is becoming an ubiquitous tool that helps companies, countries, communities, people tackle the challenges that they face every single day.
And just to bring to life on some of the things we're talking about here, especially for people that are hearing about Spire for the very first time, can you provide a bit of an overview of Spire's satellite and space infrastructure and how that infrastructure enables you to deliver on this mission that we're talking about?
Let's just pick an example, Lee, before we talk about all of the many things that we do, because it is a bit overwhelming. I mean, we got over 800 customers, 175 major use cases, 5 verticals. But I would guess that most of your listeners, they have been in contact with wildfires. How wildfires impact their lives, the lives of their communities. Maybe they even know someone like myself who has lost their home due to a wildfire. Now, the tricky thing about wildfires is that they start often in areas where there don't live a whole lot of people. As a matter of fact, 95% of the world's population lives on just 3% of the world's surface areas. So there are those massive areas where you don't have a lot of people. And so if a wildfire starts, it generally starts where it's not like, 500 people around. It's like, hey, there's a fire. Let's just, throw a bucket of water on top of it. There's no one around. So the fire gets to develop and gets larger and larger and larger until it becomes like this fire monster almost, like this overwhelming force. It gets really, really difficult to contain. Now, just imagine you had the capability of track what is happening all across the world every few minutes. And there wouldn't be a spot where no one, under quotation marks, looks or listens for hours and hours and hours. And you could identify, hey, something dangerous is happening here. Someone go look and check it out and fix it. Well, that's exactly what we do. Spire's constellation, we can run the 4th largest constellation on the planet as the what's largest listening constellation. We listen to planet Earth using radio waves, RF technologies. We cover every spot on Earth every 15 minutes, over 100 times a day. And one of our customers, Aurora Tech, they use special capabilities on our satellites to capture data about wildfires, early detection of what is happening, right? And we capture data that measures things like soil moisture or wind speeds or temperature that help you, again, like be particularly alert for certain locations. So if you have heard about wildfires, you should have heard about Spire, because the technologies and capabilities that we have from space to tackle and decrease the risk and impact from those wildfires is absolutely happening today. It's not science fiction. It is already available today.
Can you tell me a little bit about the technology that makes this possible to help you essentially monitor an early detection of such events like wildfires there? Because as climate change intensifies, these events are going to just increase, aren't they? So I'd love to find out more about how tech is solving this problem.
100%. So the first thing to visualize, if you may, is that those small devices, and when we say small devices, nearly our satellites are the size of a bottle of wine, maybe a case of wine. So we're truly talking something, very, very manageable. But it's like chock full of smart, highly advanced technology that all Spire had to develop and invent because they didn't exist originally. So they zip around Earth at 17,500 miles an hour. So every 90 minutes, the satellite covers all of Earth and flies around Earth. So you can imagine if you have a few of them that zip around at this speed every 90 minutes, all of Earth, you get a really, really good coverage, right? So that's, I think, the first thing for people to visualize, the power of being in space, covering it that quickly because they move around so fast. And then we use radio waves. Now, radio waves is something that, we don't see, right? But it is happening everywhere. Like your cell phone is connected to the cell tower with radio waves. The old radios that, some of us might still have, they use radio waves, right? Our Wi-Fi at home is using radio waves. It's like the invisible spectrum of the electromagnetic waves around us is radio waves. And they have a few really, really powerful features. One of them is that they work day and night, right? So they don't require the sun. They're just happening all the time. But even more powerful is that they can be, if done smartly, very sensitive to the weather. So, for example, recently there was a hurricane, Otis, right? Very, very fast wind speeds over the ocean. Now, as radio waves go through that hurricane field, they get a little bit distorted, right? As they go over the ocean, they get a little bit reflected in a weird way, reflecting the massive amount of energy and speed that is happening in that hurricane. And we have built a technology to listen to that radio wave from the other end and just hear that small distortion. And then analyzing that small distortion, we get to calculate things like the wind speed of a hurricane, or the temperature in the atmosphere, or the moisture over a field. And then that is the information that we use to, for example, provide a weather forecast, or predict what is the exact path that this hurricane is going to take. Or, if we combine it with data from our customer, Aurora Tech, where might there be a wildfire brewing? Where is there some smoke? And when it comes to wildfires, where there is smoke, very often there is a fire.
And you have some pretty high-profile collaborations as well with the likes of NASA, to name just one. So can you tell me about some of your collaborations and how they're helping to mitigate and track risks?
Yes, so if you think about space providing that insights on things like global security, climate change, land use, and the like, you recognize that this tend to be a lot of times common goods, right? And common goods is like basically what government should be providing to their citizenry. It's like a shared benefit that we have of being part of, let's say, a country. And then you have in those countries, you have those phenomenal organizations like the NASA, like the NOAA, like the ESA, like the UK Met Office, like all of those governmental and sometimes intergovernmental organizations like UMETSAT and ECMWF, who come to work every single day with the dedication to keep their citizen and the property of the citizens safe. And Spire empowers them to do that even better by providing them this global data set that we collect from our spacecraft. Like, for example, the temperature data of the atmosphere, the wind speed of a hurricane over the ocean, the soil moisture over land. Those data sets help the incredibly dedicated people at NOAA and NASA and other kind of organizations to do their important work to protect the life and safety of their citizenry and their property.
And of course, with the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, we're all seeing them all around the world right now. There is this growing demand for more accurate and dependable weather insights that help governments and communities better prepare and mitigate disaster. I know over here in the UK, we're seeing a lot more flooding, for example. So can you elaborate on how space-based weather data, such as what Spire provides, can offer that distinct advantage in addressing this need and also enhance our ability to better safeguard our communities from the impacts of extreme weather conditions?
It all boils down to where and when is something bad going to happen.
Yeah.
And we all are familiar, I've heard the term butterfly effect, like that not story, but truth, that the wings of a butterfly on the North Pole determine the weather in New York City a week later, right? Because the world actually is so little populated, so to speak, right? I mean, 72% of the world is oceans where there's nothing, right? I mentioned earlier, 95% of the world lives in just 3% of the world's surface area. We absolutely need space to capture data everywhere all the time to predict the weather everywhere all the time. It's one of those great global community aspects that if you want to know the weather in, London next Tuesday, you gotta have to have data from Sydney and New York and the middle of the ocean and the top of Mount Everest. And the only way to do that is from space. A big European, inter-European organization, ECMWF, did a study once that identified that something like 70-80% of the world's weather forecast accuracy comes from data from space. Now, Spire has developed a technology to deliver vast amounts of that particular type of data, in particular called radio occultation, that gives you very, very precise, very finely grained temperature measurements of the atmosphere. And if you think about what are the three most relevant things from the atmosphere, it's like, how hot is it? Where is the wind blowing and how much rain there is, right? Meteorologists, they call it temperature, moisture, and pressure. But those are the key things that you need to figure out. A few other things, of course, I'm simplifying a little bit, but those are the key things that you need to figure out. And Spire has developed technology using RF radio waves and RF technology to measure temperature and moisture in particular, and also some of the precious things. And they then feed into the forecast engines from those big agencies. And then Spire itself has a government level weather prediction capability that allows us to help our customers have a better sense when and where something bad might happen.
And one of Spire's unique offerings I was reading about is the ability to generate accurate 15-day global weather forecast from any point on the globe. So I might be coming back to you next May to find out the weather forecast for the Glastonbury Festival before I pack my tent. But seriously, can you tell me more about the technology and also the combination, really, of the technology and human expertise that make all this possible?
So it starts with the data that you capture from space, and Spire captures a particular type of data more than the rest of the world combined. That gives us a huge advantage in trying to figure out what is going to happen further out in the future. That's kind of like the first element. The second element is very, very smart people building very, very smart predictive models. Now, Spire is one of the very, very few companies that runs a full government level so-called numerical weather prediction model. So we have what's called data assimilation, where you get all the data and you analyze it and you combine it smartly, you figure out what it means, and you feed it into the physics core, which is called the dynamic core, that runs all the equations on like a 10,000 core machinery, and comes up with forecasts that then get, it's called post-processing, where you combine them and says like, okay, what does all of that actually mean for Neil when he wants to go to his festival in 12 days' time, right? And so there's a lot of physics. There is a massive amount of data science and a massive amount of AI and machine learning happening that then combined gives you the ability of what is the weather going to be in 15 days, which is very, very difficult to do. But if you have 5 days, 7 days, 10, 15 days warning that something heavy is coming down, you can be prepared. And that makes all the difference in the world.
And given the rapidly evolving landscape of space technology and the applications that come with it, I've got to ask, as we get towards the end of 2023, what are your thoughts on the future of the industry? Are there any upcoming projects or technologies at Spire that you're particularly excited about?
So in Spire, there's a couple of things that we are particularly excited about. One of them is yet another layer of weather data source that's microwave sounding, that's capturing that moisture and then temperature and pressure of the atmosphere. It's using microwaves. It's a little bit like the stuff that heats up your lunch potentially, but used on a larger scale, around planet Earth, right? And that's certainly something that we're super excited about. We're also very excited about truly safe aviation and aircraft tracking. We are part of a pretty big project in Europe, and that provides GPS independent geolocation and tracking of aircraft with very, very low latency. Simple said, whatever else happens, MH370, the tragic Malaysia Airline incident, shouldn't happen ever again. And that's what this project is about. And of course, for us, that's super, super exciting as well. But if you even take a step further outside of Spire, and you maybe really want to talk about the future 5 or maybe 10 years out, I'm getting pretty excited about what will become possible in space habitat and the moon, as more and more companies and countries are developing technologies to leverage space for scientific and security and climate change related activities, be that the moon or be that a habitat in space. So I see that underlying story that I talked to you about in the beginning, 10x capabilities every 5 years, continue to drive applications. Similarly, how Moore's Law, 2x every 2 years, has driven a myriad of applications over the last 3-4 decades, many of which we would have never dreamed of in the mid or early or late 80s.
Absolutely incredible. I love chatting with you today. And this space as well, excuse the pun, does move at an incredible rate of the speed of change there. It really does. And it can be challenging for any of us to try and keep up to speed with the latest trends, etc. So I've got to ask, how do you keep up to speed with those tech trends, around the climate, and ultimately self-educate? Any tips you can share there?
I'm a little bit of a geek, so I just love learning and listening to all this. But I may recommend a book. I think it's written by Michael Gelt, and it's called "Thinking Like Leonardo da Vinci." And he breaks it down into like 7 habits that humans can develop, and Leonardo seemed to obviously have naturally. And one of them he calls questionare. And that is that insatiable desire to understand that every single 2-year-old has, and every single 4-year-old has, and somewhere between 4 years and 40 years, some of us, decline in their questionnaire, in trying to understand things and just being fascinated by the stuff around us. So let your inner child be curious and ask and try to understand and be annoying to the people around you. But why? And how does it work? I think that's a fantastic a trait to have that enriches everyone's life.
Completely agree. I think that's a beautiful moment to end on. But before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to geek out, find a little bit more about Spire's mission, where would you like to point everyone listening?
So, first of all, I think our webpage in www.spire.com is a great place. Lots of stories, videos to learn, what we do and how we do it. You can find myself on LinkedIn, www.linkedin.com/LNIN at Peter Platzer. You can find me there. You can find Spire there. We are, of course, on Twitter, or I think it's called now X, at Spire Global, where we share stories and impacts from our customers and from ourselves, and keep you informed of what is happening in Spireland and what is happening in Spaceland all across the world.
Well, I think at the moment where climate change is increasing the risk and intensity of weather disasters around the world, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and addressing how your technology is helping your customers with monitoring and early detection, and just encouraging everyone listening to think bigger and how we can harness space to solve some of those big problems right here on Earth. But just thank you for joining me today and sharing your story.
My pleasure, Nini. It was a sincere honor to be here.
I think as we conclude this orbit around Peter Platzer's galactic mission with Spire, it's evident to me that the view from above offers not only a new perspective, but a beacon of hope. Because today's discussion underscored the importance of looking to the stars to protect our home, highlighting how Spire's sophisticated satellite network is not just observing, but actively engaging in the battle against climate catastrophes. And Peter's conviction there that every industry should develop a space strategy parallels the transformative era where the internet first beckoned businesses to think digitally through their robust constellation of satellites and profound weather and scientific expertise. Spire is charting a course for accurate global forecasts that could spell the difference between disaster and resilience. So again, thank you, Peter, for an inspiring session and for illuminating that path towards leveraging the infinite canvas of space to inscribe a future where technology serves as almost humanity's shield against the tumultuous elements of nature. But it's a big, big topic, far bigger than me and one podcast episode. So anything you want to share, let me know. techblogwriter@outlook.com. Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. But just a big thank you for taking the time to explore with me today that technologies don't just change the way we do business, but they can elevate the capacity to safeguard our planet. Time to think bigger. So until next time, keep looking up, thinking beyond the horizon, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.